Deep inside of a biotechnology lab, a large metal door slides open with a hiss. Inside, a refrigerated containment wall of several kaiju DNA types. Godzilla, Kamibus, Kumanga, Gorosaurus, Gaira, Sanda, and several others. A gloved hand puts in a PIN code to unlock the containment cell of the King's DNA. Godzilla. This figure grabs the canister and holds it up to read the biodata on it. Behind them, their collection of past specimens. We can't see much of this figure as their face is covered in shadow, yet a strange detail is that their eyes glow a faint purple. This figure walks through the facility. The technology and architecture are very futuristic with dark colors. The faint glows of purple and yellow illuminate the seams and cracks in the walls. Another door slides open as this person continues on a catwalk inside of an extremely large room, and in the space, something massive stands in the center, breathing slowly and heavily. Centered with this massive body stood two other individuals. The other one with the canister walks up to what seems to be the woman of the three. Handing her the canister, she walks off into an observation lab, while the other two individuals stand center with the body. The two have a conversation about whether they'll be able to control him with Godzilla's DNA being injected into his biological code. The one we followed states that this is why they upgraded him with a blood regulator and a neural shock collar. Who are they referring to? The scene pans out to reveal one of the Gargantuas, Gaira. He looks different. Bigger, scarier, yet in a coma, a stasis of sorts. The two individuals look up at the giant in pride as the large tubes inserted into Gaira's body begin to flow a dark red substance. The one who walked away came back to the other two and looked up at Gaira. Their arms raised slightly upwards as a form of worship as the dark red substance began to glow purple, and Gaira's eyes began to slowly illuminate with light. A monster that causes an imbalance in the natural order had just been made, a being with the King's DNA. And the king of the monsters was not pleased with this. Deep within the Japan Trench, a force of nature was sleeping. Several JSDF battleships were floating above to monitor Godzilla's vitals. While we can't see much of him in the dark depths, his body has gone through some evolutionary changes. Larger, sharper. Then his eyes open up, already pulsing blue. On the surface of the trench, alarms begin to go off inside the ships as the water below begins to glow blue. No one on the ships knows what's going on, but without any warning, a blinding blue beam slices one of the ships in half, destroying it completely. The two other ships respond by sending in depth charges down into the water to try and stop Godzilla from surfacing, but it does nothing. Godzilla explodes from the water, grabbing onto one of the ships. The crew aboard the ships look in horror as he's bigger and more aggressive. His body seems to have improved and evolved since 2003. The scar on his chest now adorned with spikes protruding out in every direction. His head having larger spines that almost look like a crown. His collarbone all the way to his shoulders having spikes that run up them, and his body structure changed for better combat. His cells learned from the last two battles and evolved to counter them. With ease, Godzilla completely obliterates the two other battleships and let out a booming roar before diving back into the depths. Godzilla was now awake and clearly pissed. The following morning, the news is covering Godzilla's attack against the JSDF last night. The year is 2006, and Tokyo is almost finished with its slow recovery process from Godzilla's battle with Kiryu and Mothra in 2004. The news reporter on the scene is near some heavy-duty trucks that have a strange sun logo on the side of them with the name Helios Vanguard Directive under the logo. The reporter states she's with a man in formal clothing who seems to be guiding the rebuild operation. He has decided to remain anonymous by her claim, but she can call him the spokesman. Laughing at this remark, she questions him about how the HVD has aided the JSDF in rebuilding Tokyo. The spokesman states that the HVD prides itself on their advancements in technology and security, and thanks to the JSDF's funding, they've only learned and evolved more on how to protect this country with its assistance with infrastructure and military. Through this, we see B-roll footage of Tokyo. Some buildings have newly implemented security systems that are of the HVDs, along with damaged buildings being restored and even upgraded with better materials and foundation. The spokesman then says how they are truly sorry to those whose lives were lost that night from Godzilla's unprovoked rampage. He pushes for the idea for the HVD to monitor and potentially neutralize Godzilla themselves. At the JSDF main base of operation, Hayato, along with other leading executives, watched this broadcast. They would have a brief discussion regarding whether they can trust someone like that with operations as important as keeping track of Godzilla. Regardless, they push that aside to focus on the king of the monsters and where he's headed. From their last readings on him, he dropped off the map somewhere deep in the Pacific. Hayato gives the orders to get more satellite imaging in the area where he vanished. He speculates Godzilla might be looking for something. Later that night, Lieutenant Togashi announces that Akane, Susumu, and Kenji have returned from their overseas combat training and will now be, in a sense, commanding officers for the Kiryu Squadron. The ceremony is held for their return, and Akane is told that Kiryu has now been put to rest at the bottom of the Japan Trench. Asuza tells her that he had done his job of letting Godzilla rest, and Akane is relieved to hear this, even if she had already seen on the news that Godzilla rose from Japan's waters again. Regardless of the ceremony going well, the lingering notion that Godzilla was not only awake but had also adapted from his last battles and is pissed about something looms over the rooms of the JSDF. The next morning, the new satellite images hit the JSDF's desk. After close inspection, they find not Godzilla, but something much bigger, an island, hidden out in the Pacific. Everyone viewing is perplexed by this, and quickly, an investigation is underway. Maybe this uncharted island could yield results. Meetings of coordination and funding are held over the next couple days, and the HVD catches wind of the JSDF's findings and offers to aid them with their state-of-the-art weaponry and military forces. Hayato is hesitant to do this at first, but because of the recent limited resources, he feels there is no option and prioritizes the safety of everyone on this expedition. And so, a date is set. And with armed forces from the JSDF and HVD, Hayato, Togashi, Akane, Asuza, and Kenji will be joining on this expedition. The night before, Hayato pays a visit to someone at their house. Former Prime Minister Machiko Suge asked him to visit because she had heard about this new island that they had discovered and wanted to come along. She couldn't understand exactly why, but she felt a calling to go there. Hayato asks if she thinks it's something to do with their past. They never confirmed whether he perished or not, Akemi, he said, and her eyes widened at that name, a name she had long since abandoned. He then gives her the location and time to be at the JSDF headquarters the following morning before he excuses himself and leaves. She's left there thinking and remembering 66, Sanda, her bond with him when he was young, his fight with Gaira, how the two were never seen after the volcano went off, and the aftermath of her changing her identity to mask herself from the public, burying a past that would be impossible to run away from. Standing up, she opened a case that contained the outfit she had worn on the day Sanda saved her life. She had made her decision. As the sun slowly rose up over the horizon, the light bounced off the metal of 2 white herons and 3 high-tech HVD hovercraft-like vehicles, with one very large cargo ship having them on top of its deck. Everyone gets on the boat, including Akemi, which Hayato is glad to see she's coming along. The ship leaves the dock. The expedition to the unknown island begins. While on their way there are multiple routine checks to make sure Godzilla isn't following or hunting them, and by all accounts, is nowhere to be found. Arriving near the island, those aboard can see its rocky and mountainous landscape. From here on, the herons and hovercrafts take to the skies to find a landing spot on the island. As they began their ascent and made it further inland, so far they saw nothing on the island. Hayato begins to wonder if this was all for nothing, but Akemi still holds out hope. As they make it to the center of the island, Akane points out a temple on the island and one of the Mothra larvae making its way to one of the edges of the island. Lucky for them, there are some decent large flat areas to land nearby. Once the 5 aircraft land, HVD forces funnel out. Some foot soldiers, some in trucks that the herons brought along. They began setting up perimeter measures and cameras to give visual aid to those on board. Those with the JSDF watch from the side as the soldiers of the HVD quickly establish themselves on the island. Meanwhile, Togashi sees the temple in the distance and suggests they start making their way there. The main crew of the JSDF, along with some additional HVD soldiers, begin their journey through the island. While on their way there, they hear rumbling and a strange faint echo following. Earthquake? Asuza asks. No, that was something different. Keep moving, Togashi quickly replies. After some time, they arrive at the temple and notice an imago Mothra carved onto the walls. This is where they've been hiding, Akemi says. One of the HVD soldiers call out that there's a strange energy inside the temple. Investigating further, they find the Cosmo twins worshipping a crystal-like object in the center of the temple. The two turn around in shock before recognizing some of those on the island. Their behavior is welcoming enough, but there's a hint of unease with the JSDF being here, along with the HVD. The twins would explain that this island is a sanctuary for the two, the Mothra larva, and the remaining kaiju that still exist. Remaining? Hayato asks. Before the twins could reply, a roar could be heard in the distance near the shore. The twins would disappear to investigate as HVD trucks were already barreling down the island to also see what that was. A JSDF truck would pick up the main group as they drove down. All the vehicles stopped at a cliff, where they could see a brown Baragon attempting to escape the island. but one of the Mothra larvae was halting its progress by shooting webs at it. The other twin would step in too, and they would hold their own against the Baragon until fire exploded from its mouth, melting away the webs on its body. It would bite down on one of the twins' tails and fling it into a cliff to turn and go after the other one. Before the fight could turn for the worse, another roar, this one bigger and louder. It boomed across the ground. Quick, thunderous footsteps got louder and louder in the scene as suddenly a large, upright tan kaiju sprung from the cliff and tackled the Baragon to the ground. While Godzilla may have been the king of the monsters, this kaiju, was the shepherd. At this moment, it made sense to Akane why she came here. This kaiju was Sanda. Sanda would clash against the Baragon by using his immense strength and environment around him, grabbing the Baragon by the horn and throwing it to the ground, grabbing rocks from a cliff and tossing them at full force at the rogue kaiju. And eventually the fight climaxed with Sanda lifting the Baragon fully into the air and slamming it to the earth, beating it to submission. The Baragon would slowly get back up and walk back more inland as Sanda gave a final growl at it. While one of the larva twins went to check up on the other, the Cosmos would explain how they have been keeping their promise of protecting the Earth from kaiju threats so long as humanity doesn't try to mess with the natural order by creating another super weapon like Kiryu. Togashi would argue against this by stating that Godzilla has awoken regardless whether or not Kiryu was at the bottom of the ocean right now. The twins would ask if they've been creating another super weapon, to which Hayato would say no. From this, the twins don't know what to say, but they could confirm that thanks to Sanda's help, there has been no kaiju that have left this island. Akane would ask how Sanda even survived his battle with Gaira in 66. The twins would recall when he first came onto the island. He was beaten, torn, and worn to his last breath. The Mothra that was actively guarding the island would keep a close eye on Sanda, and while the twins expected him to be a threat, he was the exact opposite. For years, Sanda would isolate himself in a cave he called home, resting and healing. Over time, Mothra would also help speed up his healing process, and in return, Sanda would help keep the island in balance. Over the span of decades, Sanda grew bigger and stronger from his time of battling the kaiju on the island and also undergoing his own unique forms of training. While the twins explained this, Sanda would spot the group below. He would give an initial grunt of annoyance that humans were on the island, but when he spotted Akane, he would give a slight nod, basically as a way of saying, "It's good to see you." Once the Baragon was out of sight, Sanda would check up on the Mothra larva that was overpowered by Baragon, and they slowly picked themselves off the ground. Sanda would then make his way back to his cave as the main group continued their research and findings on the island to see if there was a reason why Godzilla was awake. During this, the twins would give some theories too, and at one point the two would converse with each other in private about the legitimacy of the HVD. After some time, while good data was gathered on the island, there was no solid ground to believe that this island in particular was the reason for Godzilla's rampage. However, it did explain the origin location from where these kaiju appear in attack populated areas like Japan. Eventually, the JSDF and HVD troops would return to their means of getting onto the island to leave as the sun went down. In the distance, everyone could see a massive storm beginning to roll in, so this was a good time to leave the island and the general area before they got swallowed in the storm. Akane and some of the others with the JSDF thanked the twins for allowing them to do research on this island, and the twins would be welcoming to this. After, the aircraft squadron lifted off and began their return to the cargo ship. As they circled the island to gain more momentum, those aboard the aircrafts could see the other kaiju roaming the island. Along with the Baragon, they also spotted a theropod-like kaiju, a giant spider, a giant serpent, the Mothra larva twins that seemed to be creating cocoons for themselves, and Sanda in his home. The shepherd was sitting at the edge of his cave looking over the island. The edge of his cave was adorned with several types of kaiju bones. He watched the aircrafts fly away from the island before lumbering into the darkness of the cave. Eventually, the vehicles docked on the boat and would make their way back to Japan. Meanwhile, somewhere far off, in a room only illuminated by the static of multiple screens, a coded message would be displayed on one of the screens. Recon diagnostics complete. Multiple subject samples located. The figure in shadows gazed upon the message while another entity stood behind him and requested the confirmation to send Gaira, to which the architect would turn his upper half around and give the approval. Let the two have a warm reunion. Heavy rain and lightning swept over Farro Island as the kaiju rest. From the aggressive waves hitting against the shores, a blue glow illuminated from the depths. As the glow spread further, it starts to shift in hue to purple. A large body begins to creep its way around the island, searching for something, its booming footsteps muffled by the thunder and winds of the storm. The details of its body camouflaged with the darkness of the sky. This kaiju stops for a moment when it walks near the temple that the two larvae have cocooned at and stares motionless before turning its head and continuing. The Baragon from earlier is seen resting under a bridge-like rock formation. This kaiju bares its webbed and clawed hands as it slowly walks its way towards the sleeping kaiju. With a shriek so loud it breaks through the storm, Sanda is woken up and immediately begins making his way down to the mountain to see what happened. He is aggravated being woken up during a storm like this, but can't let a kaiju try and escape with the waves being this bad. Following the roars and screeches of panic, he finds the Baragon being put in a headlock by a bigger kaiju as it's trying to rip its nose horn off. Sanda rushes in, but this shadow kaiju slings the Baragon at Sanda, causing him to be flung back a distance away. Hearing a visceral crack and a roar of pain, Sanda picks himself up to see this kaiju holding the Baragon up by its neck with one hand and its severed horn with the other. Sanda growls in rage, and then another flash of lightning. And Sanda is silenced. The lightning illuminates the area around them enough to show Gaira, his eyes clouded in a yellow haze, his body now more scaly and aquatic, his body structure bulkier, and the strange neck and arm braces he had that illuminated with colors of yellow and purple. Sanda knew this was his brother, but something was wrong here. Before the situation could be processed further, Gaira threw a now limp Baragon at Sanda before charging at him. Gaira was much faster as he caught up to Sanda and slashed at his stomach, and following it up with a thunderous punch right to Sanda's face. That hit alone sent Sanda's senses into a haywire and made his ears ring out. Regardless, the shepherd pushed as he tackled Gaira into a nearby cliff and threw his own punches. These hits only made Gaira flinch, and in response, Gaira headbutted his brother before uppercutting Sanda into the air. As Sanda lay there, Gaira got on top and began throwing punch after punch until Sanda's face became a bloody mess. Before Gaira could land a killing blow, the collar around his neck pulsed with a purple energy. Gaira stood up, grabbed the Baragon and its horn, and made his way back to the shores. Sanda in a haze stumbled up and followed after him. Gaira stomped his way back into the ocean before submerging completely with Sanda behind and pushing through the heavy waves. But once Gaira submerged, even carrying a kaiju, he swam away at an unnatural speed. Combined with the waves pushing against Sanda, there was no chance of catching up. Sanda collapsed from exhaustion as he watched his brother disappear into the depths. Several weeks had passed since the expedition to Farro Island. At the same time, fear surrounding Godzilla continued to grow. News reports replayed footage of his violent reemergence from weeks prior almost nightly. Entire talk shows debated whether Japan's dependence on the JSDF had become outdated. Public confidence in the military slowly eroded while trust in the HVD rose higher every day. Then, Baragon surfaced. Near-dusk tremors suddenly rocked a massive coastal oil processing facility outside Yokohama. Workers initially believed the shaking came from an offshore earthquake until the highway itself erupted upward, sending a shower of asphalt and fire into the air. Baragon burst from beneath the elevated roadway. The kaiju tore directly through the fuel lines and support structures as vehicles toppled into flaming pits below. Civilians fled through smoke-choked evacuation routes while emergency sirens screamed across the harbor. The JSDF deployed immediately. Tanks positioned themselves along the refinery highways while Maser-equipped vehicles opened fire into the kaiju's side. Baragon retaliated violently. Then, the HVD arrived. Black hovercrafts descended through the smoke while specialized combat drones swarmed around Baragon with eerie precision. Unlike the chaotic JSDF assault, every HVD movement felt rehearsed. Within minutes, Baragon collapsed near the center of the facility. News crews rushed to capture the moment live as civilians and workers watched in stunned disbelief. The spokesman soon emerged from one of the hovercrafts, calmly walking through the burning complex, surrounded by HVD security personnel. Behind him, Baragon was restrained beneath massive cables while emergency crews extinguished fires across the refinery. The spokesman began addressing the cameras directly. He spoke of sacrifice, of evolution, of humanity finally standing equal against monsters. Then, behind the facility, before the spokesman could continue, the ocean beyond the harbor began glowing. The water churned violently. Godzilla. Godzilla exploded upward from the sea. Tsunami-like waves slammed against the harbor walls as civilians screamed and scattered from the refinery. The king of the monsters had arrived. His eyes locked immediately toward the hidden HVD containment structure near the shoreline. Even amid the chaos, it was obvious to Hayato and the observing JSDF officials that Godzilla had not arrived by chance. He sensed something. Within seconds, Godzilla's atomic breath tore across the harbor, obliterating multiple HVD defense cannons and vaporizing an entire section of an elevated highway. The HVD panicked. Without warning, the hidden containment structure finally opened completely, and Gaira emerged. The public saw him for the first time. The massive aquatic Gargantua lunged at Godzilla with terrifying speed, tackling the king through the refinery complex as debris and flames erupted around them. Gaira avoided Godzilla's atomic breath by fractions of seconds, using collapsing structures and fuel towers as cover while targeting Godzilla's joints and blind spots with calculated brutality. Watching from command screens inside an HVD hovercraft, the architect monitored streams of combat data while symbols and coding flashed across nearby monitors. The battle quickly escalated across the refinery highways. Godzilla slammed Gaira through suspended pipeline systems before biting into his shoulder and throwing him across the burning harbor. Godzilla walked up to the downed Gargantua, ready to fire off another beam of atomic breath on top of Gaira, before the sun behind Godzilla was shadowed by another mass. Sanda emerged from the offshore cliffs beyond the refinery and immediately charged into the battlefield, tackling Godzilla away from his wounded brother. For a brief moment, the brothers naturally fought together. Gaira hesitated when he saw Sanda behind him. Godzilla pushed both Gargantuas backwards through the burning facility, overpowering them through sheer strength, but Sanda refused to retreat. As Godzilla prepared another atomic blast, Sanda grabbed Gaira by the arm and let out a thunderous roar directly at him. The two brothers charged simultaneously. Sanda tackled Godzilla forward while Gaira leapt upward from a collapsed refinery tower and drove both feet directly into Godzilla's chest. The impact launched the king backward into the harbor while a massive fuel platform exploded around him. Then, together, the brothers worked to defeat the king of the monsters. Sanda held Godzilla in place long enough for Gaira to grab multiple exposed oil pipelines and rupture them directly across the king's body. As fuel engulfed the battlefield, Gaira slammed his electrified restraints against Godzilla's dorsal plates while Sanda drove the king downward into the burning harbor itself. The resulting explosion shook the coastline. When the smoke cleared, Godzilla disappeared beneath the ocean. The city erupted into cheers. To the public, humanity had just witnessed the impossible. Godzilla had been driven away. The spokesman immediately returned before the cameras, while Gaira stood behind him. Sanda remained farther back near the shoreline, cautious and uneasy as the HVD personnel carefully kept their distance from him. The spokesman addressed the world once more. "This guardian," he said while gesturing towards Gaira, "has shown humanity that coexistence is possible. Even now, another of their kind stands behind him willingly. This one understands that humanity deserves protection." The camera briefly turned towards Sanda. The giant merely stared silently toward Gaira. And far beneath the ocean's surface, Godzilla had returned to the depths, but the next time he would surface, he was going to finish the job. In the following months, the HVD's influence expanded rapidly across Japan. Their victory against Godzilla became one of the most replayed events in modern history. At JSDF headquarters, however, suspicion continued growing. Hayato and Akane both knew the story did not add up. The JSDF finds itself politically cornered. Every attempt to investigate the organization is blocked by the government. Officials now aligned with the HVD's growing influence. Akane volunteers to go undercover. Officially, she joins the HVD as a consultant on kaiju engagement operations. Secretly, she used the position to investigate their internal operations. During this time, she discovered hidden files referencing biological synchronization systems, alien signal frequencies, and offshore laboratories hidden beyond Japan's waters. Meanwhile, on Farro Island, life deteriorated rapidly. The island had once felt balanced despite its dangers. Now, tension spreads through every region of the ecosystem. The Gorosaurus on the island is now extremely territorial due to Gaira constantly fighting it. Kumanga nests in forests they once avoided. Even Manda remained near shallow coastal waters instead of retreating into deep ocean trenches. Only Sanda continued trying to preserve peace. And Gaira watched constantly. The brothers spent time together across the island, communicating through low growls and body language much like they had decades ago. But something remained deeply wrong. At times, Gaira seemed almost normal. Other times, he stared blankly into the distance while the restraints around his body pulsed with purple and yellow energy. Gaira was extremely violent at times, yet he would still listen to Sanda when correction was needed. The twins were on guard over this new occupant on the island. but he still believed his brother could recover. At night, hidden cameras mounted throughout Farro Island transmitted live footage directly into HVD facilities. They are studying them and cataloging them, preparing. One evening during an HVD shift change, Akane sneaks deeper into the organization's primary laboratory complex. She bypasses several secured checkpoints before discovering hidden files detailing kaiju behavioral manipulation, including Baragon. The attacks were staged. The HVD intentionally modified and released the monster to manufacture public fear. Before Akane can even copy everything, alarms suddenly activate elsewhere in the building. Security forces rush past her position, forcing her to retreat, but not before she recovers one final file: coordinates. A hidden coastal facility far from mainland Japan. Akane realizes immediately, this is where Gaira was created. Determined to uncover the truth, she secretly boards one of the HVD's transport hovercraft days later. The vehicle travels through heavy fog toward an isolated fortress-like facility built directly into sea cliffs. Inside, Akane finally sees the HVD leadership gathered. The spokesman, the biologist, the architect. Up close, something about them feels deeply wrong. Their movements are too synchronized, too precise. Their faces are covered in strange curved lines that seep into their flesh. Human, but not entirely. Hidden nearby, Akane overhears their conversation. The architect orders a new operation to begin immediately. Subdue the samples at any cost. Eliminate those foolish enough to stand in your way. Gaira. Above the facility, multiple HVD hovercraft launch into the sky and start making their way to Farro Island. Akane finds a way out of the facility by taking one of the hovercrafts in the facility. While much of Farro Island glowed beneath orange skies and crashing waves, Sanda rested near his cave high above the coastline. Then he heard it. A roar. Not territorial. Painful. Another followed, then another. Sanda immediately rose and rushed toward the sound. As he crossed the forest and cliff paths on the island, smoke rose beyond the mountains. Trees collapsing in the distance while distant explosions echoed through the valleys below. Then he saw them, Gaira and Baragon, working together against the other occupants on the island. Gaira battled Gorosaurus while Baragon attacked from below through the earth itself. Gorosaurus fought desperately, slashing at Gaira's chest and delivering powerful kicks that sent the aquatic Gargantua crashing through stone pillars. Nearby, Varen glided overhead, attempting to distract Baragon while Kumonga blanketed sections of the battlefield in webbing, but Gaira was overwhelmingly stronger. He caught Gorosaurus mid-charge and slammed him repeatedly into volcanic cliffs before throwing the dinosaur directly into Kumonga's nest structures. Baragon burst from underground moments later and rammed Varen out of the sky with his glowing horn. Sanda charged into the battle instantly. He tackled Gaira away from Gorosaurus while roaring furiously at his brother, trying desperately to snap him out of his violent behavior. For a brief moment, Gaira hesitated again. Then, the restraints pulsed violently, and the hesitation vanished. Sanda fought desperately to protect the others, while Gaira and Baragon overwhelmed the island's defenders one by one. Kumonga lost multiple legs beneath Gaira's assault, while Varen crashed unconscious into the jungle below. Gorosaurus continued fighting despite broken teeth and massive wounds across his chest. Then, the HVD artillery arrived. Hidden hovercrafts emerged from the clouds above the island while massive restraint cables launched downward into the battlefield. The HVD had not come to kill, they came to capture. Sanda realized this far too late. As sunset faded into darkness, Gaira and Baragon finally overwhelmed him together. Injured and exhausted, Sanda could barely move as massive HVD restraint cannons locked onto him. One by one, the defeated kaiju were hauled away. Gorosaurus, Varen, Kumonga, Kamibus, Ebira, Manda, even Sanda himself. Only Gaira and Baragon remained standing, and somewhere far offshore, hidden beneath the ocean, Godzilla began moving toward Japan. The following morning, every major news station across Japan aired emergency coverage regarding the Farro Island incident. Footage showed HVD personnel transporting restrained kaiju across the ocean while the spokesman addressed the public directly. He claimed that the HVD had uncovered evidence of coordinated kaiju aggression orchestrated by Godzilla himself. The tyrannical king of the monsters, he declared, had begun gathering these creatures as a weapon against humanity. The HVD alone acted before catastrophe could spread. Much of the public believed him, but not the JSDF. As debates erupted inside headquarters regarding the legitimacy of the HVD's claims, Akane finally returned with the data she had stolen from the coastal facility. The truth was worse than anyone expected. Baragon's attack had been staged. Gaira was controlled through alien synchronization systems, and the captured monsters from Farro Island were being transported somewhere beneath Tokyo itself. Before the JSDF could fully process the information, emergency alerts suddenly erupted across naval command systems. Godzilla was making his way to Japan. Godzilla was not attacking randomly. Too many kaiju had been captured. The natural balance had collapsed. And now, the king of the monsters was coming to correct it. Far beneath Tokyo, restrained inside massive HVD containment chambers, Sanda slowly opened his eyes to reveal he was being restrained along with other kaiju. The scenery looked like something out of a horror movie. Several kaiju were locked away, motionless in stasis tubes. The architect walked up to Sanda, and the Gargantua growled, trying to swipe at the structure the architect was standing on, but he couldn't move. "Don't fight it. Fighting only delays the inevitable," the architect said calmly. "Worry not. You will join your brother soon." Tokyo had not slept in days. Rain poured endlessly across the city as emergency sirens echoed between skyscrapers. Massive digital billboards replayed footage of Gaira battling Godzilla at the refinery over and over again, while commentators praised the Helios Vanguard directive as humanity's new protectors. But inside JSDF headquarters, the atmosphere within the command center felt suffocating. Officers argued across tables while intercepted HVD transmissions flickered across giant monitors. Emergency reports arrived faster than analysts could process them. "You made it back," Kenji said. "Barely," Akane answered. "The HVD knows someone accessed their systems." Togashi clenched his jaw and furrowed his brows as Akane continued transferring files onto the display. Images of containment chambers appeared across the monitors. Massive stasis tubes stretched deep beneath Tokyo, alongside energy restraints surrounding unconscious kaiju, all imprisoned beneath the HVD's headquarters. "And the alien leadership?" Asuza asked. Akane nodded slowly. "The spokesman, the biologist, and the architect. They aren't fully human." Hayato stared at the files for several long seconds before finally speaking. "Then we end this, tonight." A covert strike plan formed rapidly, while the remaining naval forces attempted to monitor Godzilla's movement through Tokyo Bay. Togashi would lead a JSDF infiltration team directly into the HVD headquarters beneath the city. Akane would guide them through the facility's internal layout. Kenji and Asuza would assist with explosives and communications. Akemi insisted on going. "It's too dangerous," Togashi warned. "She's the only reason Sanda may still trust humans," Akane countered quietly. Akemi looked directly at Hayato. "If he sees strangers storming that place, he'll think he's under attack again. He needs someone he remembers." After a long pause, Hayato nodded at Togashi. Hesitating at this for a moment, Togashi sighed before replying, "Then you're coming with us." Regardless of the HVD and JSDF's attempts to stop Godzilla, it didn't matter. Godzilla erupted from the ocean like a living natural disaster. Fleets of hovercrafts attempted to fire experimental plasma torpedoes before Godzilla's atomic breath vaporized them completely. Without Gaira, the HVD was helpless, and Godzilla was moving directly toward Tokyo. Within minutes, evacuation sirens screamed across the city as the first sighting reports emerged from Tokyo Bay. The HVD attempted to respond immediately. Deep beneath the city, massive containment doors began opening around Gaira's chamber. The aquatic Gargantua slowly lifted his head as purple energy pulsed through the restraint system surrounding his body. Above the chamber, the architect watched silently. "Deploy him," he ordered. Moments later, Godzilla made landfall. Tokyo shook violently beneath his weight as he emerged through the harbor district. Civilians fled through evacuation tunnels while military helicopters struggled to maintain altitude around the King's approach. Then another roar echoed across the city. Gaira emerged from beneath the HVD itself. Gaira launched himself directly at Godzilla with terrifying speed, slamming both monsters through multiple buildings. Godzilla retaliated instantly. His atomic breath tore across downward, carving through towers and vaporizing entire sections of roadway. But Gaira moved differently now. Faster, sharper, more unnatural. His yellow eyes pulsed blue as atomic energy surged beneath the cracks of his armored skin. At the last second, Gaira twisted sideways and drove a glowing fist directly into Godzilla's jaw. The impact detonated like an explosion. An atomic shockwave erupted from the punch itself. Inside the HVD command systems, synchronization readings spiked wildly. "He's evolving," the biologist whispered in disbelief. Gaira attacked again immediately. Every strike now carried bursts of stolen atomic energy. Thunderclap like shockwaves erupted each time his fist collided with Godzilla's body. Far below the battle, the JSDF strike team infiltrated the HVD headquarters. Togashi led the group through maintenance corridors while distant tremors from the monster battle shook dust from the ceilings above them. Then, gunfire erupted suddenly. HVD security forces emerged from intersecting hallways as plasma rounds tore across the corridor. Togashi immediately returned fire while Kenji deployed explosives along nearby support pillars. Then, disaster struck. Godzilla charged his atomic breath directly at Gaira's chest. At the last possible second, Gaira lunged forward and drove an atomic punch directly into Godzilla's face. The beam fired wildly off course. Instead of striking Gaira, the atomic ray tore downward through the city and directly into the HVD's headquarters itself. HVD security forces were vaporized where they stood while containment systems overloaded throughout the lower chambers. Togashi barely avoided falling debris as explosions erupted around the strike team. The surviving JSDF forces pushed deeper underground through collapsing hallways until they reached the central containment chamber. At the center of the chamber stood the spokesman and the biologist. Their synthetic skin had begun to tear from the heat and destruction above. The JSDF team stared in horror, and the biologist smiled coldly. Gunfire erupted immediately. The final human battle began. JSDF forces exchanged fire with the HVD guards across the collapsing chambers, while Togashi pursued the biologist between failing containment systems. Asusa and Akane attempted to disable the restraint generators surrounding Sanda's chamber, while Kenji fought desperately to keep incoming HVD reinforcements away from them. The spokesman moved with horrifying speed. He slammed one soldier into a containment console, hard enough to kill him instantly before charging directly toward Akane. Kenji intercepted him. The two crashed through a collapsing walkway while sparks and fire erupted around them. Meanwhile, Togashi cornered the biologist near ruptured fuel lines running along the containment wall. She lunged forward. Togashi fired immediately. The bullet ruptured the fuel line behind the creature. A massive explosion engulfed the entire chamber section. The biologist screamed as flames consumed her synthetic flesh, exposing burning alien armor beneath before the creature collapsed into the fire. Elsewhere, Kenji struggled desperately against the spokesman as debris rained from the ceiling above them. The alien attempted to break free, and Kenji refused to let go. Akane screamed. He looked towards her one final time. "I'm gonna hold this lying bastard down," Kenji said with a smile before he wrapped both arms around the spokesman, as collapsing rubble crashed down around them. The impact buried both beneath the collapsing structure. Above the city, Gaira's evolution accelerated further. Blue atomic energy now surged constantly beneath his skin while violent purple cracks spread across his body. Yet he continued attacking Godzilla relentlessly. The architect watched from the highest level of the collapsing headquarters. "Enough," he said coldly, and then he activated the kill switch. Deep underground, every containment chamber suddenly surged with electricity. The imprisoned kaiju convulsed violently. Sanda roared in agony as electricity surged through his restraints. Akame rushed towards Sanda immediately. Asusa and Akane desperately worked the failing control systems while Togashi forced open damaged power relays manually. Finally, the restraint systems shut down. Sanda collapsed forward weakly as the electricity stopped. For several tense seconds, he barely moved. Then, Akame approached him slowly. The giant stared at her through exhausted eyes. "It's okay," she whispered softly. "You're safe now." Sanda slowly recognized her and calmed. But above the facility, the kill switch had triggered something far worse. Gaira screamed. The restraints regulating his unstable DNA began overloading violently as blue and purple energy erupted beneath his armored skin. He tore the restraints from his body piece by piece while atomic shockwaves exploded outward, uncontrollably across Tokyo. Without the control system stabilizing him, his body began mutating rapidly. His muscles expanded unnaturally. Cracks spread across his armored plating. Atomic energy leaked directly from his flesh. Gaira had become something else entirely. Something dying. Godzilla immediately recognized the change, but the berserk Gargantua attacked anything nearby indiscriminately now. Buildings, military forces, even himself. He tore chunks of armor directly from his own body while roaring in visible agony. Inside the collapsing HVD headquarters, the architect watched calmly through massive observation windows, then quietly escaped through an emergency evacuation tunnel. Sanda suddenly rose to his full height inside the collapsing chamber. The surviving JSDF crew stared upward. The facility around them began collapsing. completely. Sanda shielded them. Massive support beams crashed across his back as he protected Akane and the surviving soldiers while guiding them toward the surface. The survivors escaped into the ruined streets and witnessed the final battle. Tokyo was burning. Godzilla and Berserk Gaira tore through the city like a living catastrophe. Gaira no longer fought strategically. He fought in agony. He slammed Godzilla through a broadcasting tower before clawing violently at his own chest as atomic energy burst from beneath his skin. Sanda approached carefully, letting off a low and remorseful growl. For one moment, the Berserk Gargantua hesitated. Recognition flickered faintly beneath his glowing eyes. Then, the pain overtook him again. He roared and attacked blindly. Godzilla intercepted him. The king of the monsters slammed Gaira backward through multiple buildings before biting directly into his shoulder and hurling him across the city. Sanda tried again desperately, but Gaira's body was literally tearing itself apart now. Every atomic pulse caused more damage internally. Godzilla understood. Sanda did not. The tan Gargantua desperately shielded his brother from military firewall, trying to restrain him without further injury. Gaira struck a jagged elbow strike into Sanda's side as the Gargantua pushed off of him in pain. Gaira stumbled back and accidentally impaled himself against the shattered remains of a skyscraper. He screamed in unbearable pain. Blue and purple energy erupted from the wound as his body destabilized completely. Godzilla slowly stood. His dorsal plates began glowing. Not blue, orange. The air itself distorted from the heat. Sanda immediately realized what was happening. The Gargantua was going to get up before truly seeing the state Gaira was in. What was there to save his brother at this point? So with that, he looked at Godzilla in pain before ducking his head down. Godzilla gave Sanda a look before slowly turning his head. With a shockwave that sent a tremor through the city, a spiral heat ray erupted across Tokyo in a blinding orange-red beam. The blast consumed Gaira completely. The resulting explosion illuminated the storm clouds above the city like the sunrise itself. When light finally faded, nothing remained of Gaira except burning remains collapsing into the street below. Silence followed for the first time all night. The battle was over. Days later, Tokyo began rebuilding once more. Emergency broadcast exposed the truth about the HVD to the world. The organization collapsed almost overnight after evidence of alien manipulation spread globally. At JSDF headquarters, the surviving crew gathered quietly, while memorials for the dead filled the command center walls, including Kenji's. The HVD believed nature existed to be controlled, Hayato said quietly during the final report. But nature does not submit, and when humanity tries to force balance through fear and violence, this is the result. On Farro Island, rain fell softly across the cliffs overlooking the ocean. Sanda carried Gaira's burned remains carefully through the jungle toward the cave Sanda wished he and his brother could coexist in. The surviving Gargantua moved slowly, almost mournfully. As thunder echoed in the distance, at the edge of the cavern, Sanda stopped. For a long time, he simply stared downward into the darkness below. Then, he gently lowered his brother's remains into the abyss. The body disappeared into the cavern depths before striking the rocks below. Moments later, the unstable cliffs collapsed inward. Stone buried the cavern completely, a grave. Sanda stood there silently for hours afterward, while the storm rolled across Farro Island, alone again. The twins would watch from afar and give their blessings to Sanda for his loss. The remaining kaiju on the island also fell silent out of respect for their shepherd. This was a man-made nightmare that never needed to happen. But at least, Gaira could now rest. And his brother would always be nearby. From afar, a white heroine would hover, with Togashi, Akane, Hayato, and Akeme watching the video feed back at HQ. "We can't go back," Hayato said quietly. "We've done enough damage to his once peaceful life," he continued. No one replied, but they understood. Akeme's eyes were watery as she silently cried. This was the consequence of things outside of nature messing with its balance. Those in the room agreed to let Mothra and Godzilla handle the Earth's cosmic order and balance, because when humanity or otherworldly factions attempted it, nothing but carnage and chaos follows. This planet was originally theirs, so humanity needed to accept the ancient forces that kept the Earth stable. Several weeks later, Tokyo is seen being salvaged after the devastation, and Godzilla surfaces on the shores of Farro Island near the two Mothra cocoons. The twins look up cautiously while Godzilla stares them down. Hearing Sanda's roar, he looks up to see the Gargantua on the cliff, locked and ready to fight. Yet, Godzilla only growls at Sanda in a form of understanding. The two would stare at each other before Godzilla turned and swam back to the depths. The first kaiju, Godzilla, has spared. The twins speculated that maybe this malevolent king may not have been as violent as they once thought. Maybe, just maybe, Godzilla has changed. Oh, wow! What a ride! Thank you for watching! For this What If, I wanted to go more in depth while also creating a much more original story. So, if you've stuck around this long, please let me know what you guys thought. Real quick, I wanted to give a massive shout out to my amazing team who helps makes these videos possible. Power Hour as assistant writer, Tom Arts as visual artist, Darfezilla Arts as creature design artist, Zahara 4K or Z as character design artist, and Barryzilla as audio designer for the Roars. All of these amazing and talented people are so much fun to work with, and they make these What Ifs so much better and wilder. I'll have their accounts linked below, so please go follow them and show them some love. And last but not least, thank you for your continued support on the What If series. Without your support, none of this would be possible, and I hope you stick around for the next exciting What If story. So with that, I'm Seismic. Subscribe if you're interested, drink plenty of water, and I'll see you all on the flip side. Peace out! Far beyond Japan, hidden deep within the coastal HVD facility, emergency lights flickered across ruined corridors. Inside a dark chamber, 3 damaged figures stood together. The architect, the surviving spokesman, and the bird remains of the biologist sustained by alien machinery. Before them stood a massive silhouette hidden beneath the darkness. Metal claws, a hooked beak, and a stature and size that seemed to be larger than even Godzilla. The 3 slowly knelt to this towering entity. Our establishment on Earth has fallen. Their populace has abandoned us, the architect said quietly, his face now being shown. Gaira chose their side, to not see our vision through. The architect continued as the 3 then looked up at this cybernetic kaiju. So we call upon your name to be the leading horseman of our revolution. The camera pans out fully to reveal this kaiju, strung up by tubes and chains, listening. Its mechanical beak opens, and it lets out a groan. Its singular eye flashes yellow before the screen cuts to black. Hail the revolutionary. Gigan.